I really appreciate everyone coming tonight and being willing to listen. This is something I think that obviously for me, very near and dear to my heart, but it's something I think that with the pandemic, with COVID has become more of a conversation. People have started to focus more on what's happening with themselves. And I think a lot of that is because we haven't been able to escape ourselves this year. We've had to sit in our stuff a lot of the time, which I think is pretty uncomfortable. So I'm gonna say two things because I'm super self-aware. I'm going to just keep talking. I'm used to people. I'm used to a back and forth. And so if I take a minute and wait, it's because I'm used to someone saying something. And also I'm trying to process. And so intentions, I don't know, Angela, did you put up like the brief little, I don't know if you were able to send that or just the little outline.
Yeah, I can do
okay. So intentions, the first thing that I wanted to address, for me, I always have an intention for something. I'm setting an intention. Essentially, why am I doing this? Why is this important for me, right? And so showing up here for you all tonight, that's phenomenal. Now I want you to think about what your purpose is for showing up here, what you're hoping to learn, what you're hoping to hear, what you're hoping that this provides for you, that either it's something that you walk away with a question answered, you walk away with some reflection. My intention is that everyone here walks away with a little bit more knowledge about themselves, about how they handle things currently, about what they're doing right now that works, because I think we have a tendency to focus on what's not working, and that keeps us in a perpetual loop, right? And I think that that's been hard to escape too, right? Because a lot of the times when we're isolated and separated from our support networks, we start to go down a really negative path. And so we start to reflect on everything that hasn't worked, and it keeps us there. And so things like gratitude, right? A simple thing, a piece of paper, cutting that up into 7 pieces every week, and just every day at the end of the day, this is what went well. This is where I hit it out of the park today. And thinking about all of the different roles that we play in our lives, right? Parents, spouses, partners, siblings, children, community members, right? Church community members, families within families, right? And so just thinking about what went well. So setting an intention. So I want everyone to think about that. I'll go all over the place. I apologize. That's the thing. It's nice when we're passionate about things. It allows us to get really to think about them a lot more, right? Spend more time there. Okay, so the first thing really, depression. A lot of times, and I'm going to kind of integrate a few things, because I do know that I would imagine a lot of you are parents, right? Just statistically, probably maybe half of you are parents. And so I'll integrate some stuff here and there. A lot of times we think about like when our adolescents come to us and say, I'm depressed. And what I tend to hear often is a parent almost like dismissing that, right? It's like, oh, you're a teenager, what do you have to be depressed about? Before COVID, there was a lot for young people to experience depression about, right? And so when I say depression, I want you to think about depression as merely a cluster of symptoms. Depression isn't just not being able to get out of bed. Depression is not just not being able to brush your hair. Depression is so many different things. Okay, it's not picking up the phone. It's not answering text messages. It's not being able to, it's not being able to do the things you do every day. If you normally know, like, oh, my pattern is I get out of bed every day and I make my bed and A, B, C, D, and I notice, God, getting out of bed and making the bed has become a task. That's where we want to tune in, when we start to notice changes, when we start to notice shifts, right? So a cluster of symptoms. So yes, sadness. We do want to also think about things like anger, frustration, hopelessness, isolation, right? So literally moving away from our support networks. And this is sometimes very unintentionally. People sometimes feel like they've talked about something so much with the people they care about that those people are now sick of it. And so they start to draw back a little bit. We want to keep engaging with people, even when we start to feel like we're at our worst. We want again, tuning in, knowing ourselves. What are my habits? What do I do that I start to notice is different? So a cluster of symptoms: exhaustion, muscle aches, health anxieties. So health anxieties, there was a question about things like germophobia, which I know that, and I don't know the DSM by heart, and I give kudos to anyone who does. I know that there's probably a very medical term for germophobia, but when we think about things like fear of germs or even health anxieties, a lot of times when we're dealing with depression, anxiety is typically present. They are not the same thing, but they typically go very much hand in hand. People start to experience a very low mood, and they start to become very much agitated and attuned to their environment, worried. How are things going to turn out? What's going to happen? So well, we know with depression, cluster of symptoms, anxiety, same thing, right? So I wrote a couple things down. So I apologize if I'm looking down. I'm just looking at my paper here. So fear is very, very indicative of anxiety. And so with clients, I always say, what are you afraid of? And I want people to think about that. What am I afraid of? What am I afraid is going to happen if the worst thing I'm thinking about happens? And we have to also think about where our anxiety is at, right? So if we're really anxious about our health, right, and we know that we might be prone to panic, we probably do not want to intensely focus on the sensations we're currently having. That's going to be very counterproductive, right? But I'll talk about panic separately. Panic is a symptom of anxiety. It's another sign, like, what am I panicking about, right? What am I afraid of? What can't I control the outcome of? Whether it is my children's wellness, right? And this is where, again, if we have children who are struggling, we want to fix them, or our spouse or our partner or our sister or our brother, right? We want to fix people. We're humans. We have this natural tendency. People, though, they have to want to fix themselves. And so what we want to do is step back when we see someone else hurting and ask ourselves, if I were in this place, how would I want to hear this? Because again, as humans, we tend to just say it as it is, right? And so someone we're really close to, we say exactly what we're seeing, right? I think you should do this. Sometimes people say, like, how do I tell my friend they should see a therapist? You don't. You just don't say to your friends, see a therapist. They don't typically take that really well. Your mom's not going to take that well. Your sibling's not going to take that well either, right? We want to think about, how would I want to hear that? I see that you're struggling, right? I don't know in this time how it has been for you all, right? But looking around, friends, family, recognizing when people are struggling, right? We've had to tune into that more. Again, we've been around each other a lot. And so that takes me to body awareness, right? So with anxiety, I ask people, where do you feel your anxiety? So people often hear, I can't swallow, I can't even get it down, right? So here, chest, I can't breathe. These are like what I hear more often than not. Everybody has their own experience. And I want to, really solidify that everyone's experience is very unique. And so that's why we kind of want to pay attention to what we're feeling. Your experience is not going to be written, although I Google, but it's not going to be written on a Google website, right? Like everybody is sharing what's happening with them. So chest, throat, head, am I sweating? Do I have a stomach ache? A lot of people experience intestinal distress when they are very anxious. It's very common. There's really like no way to deal with it other than dealing with the anxiety. And so we want to, again, tune into our bodies. Where am I feeling my I'm sorry? Where am I feeling my anxiety, right? Okay, so how am I recognizing just by like a little brief, how many of you pay attention? And that's if you're on camera, how many of you pay attention to what's happening in your body? Literally, like you're tuned. Okay, nice, very nice. It's like they're clues, right? There are clues happening all of the time. So if that's happening when we're in distress, why are we not using that when we're not in distress, right? Why are we not paying attention to ourselves all of the time? This is what I feel like when I'm happy. I notice these things when I feel joyful. I notice that when my child, like I noticed the little child appear before. I notice that when my child appears, I feel this urge to immediately nurture. We need to pay attention to what's happening all of the time because our body is constantly giving us clues about what we're experiencing. And so to tie a knot about the anxiety thing, paying attention to our body gets us even deeper into the what's happening. What is my fear? Is it that I can't breathe right now? Is it that I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job? I'm afraid that my child is not going to go back to school next year. I'm afraid that my child is going to go back to school. And as a disclaimer, I can't relate. So I'm out of that stage. But if you have a child that you want to go back to school next year, they can with gear. So, and the honestly, and the mental wherewithal. So, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. I don't want to leave anxiety without talking about this. Your children have been experiencing a lot of anxiety, probably. They don't know what to make of that. Children don't know what anxiety is. A lot of times we don't. We get scared and we start to panic. Your child, when they start to feel something different from what they're often like told to feel or learn to feel, it can be even scarier for them. And so they have a tendency to bury it even deeper. This feels too scary. I don't know what to do with it. And so they suppress it and it ends up coming out in other ways. And we see this a lot of times and when people use the term like OCD, we want to almost like, here's the thing, we want to stay away from any of that because we don't want to shame people. And also because OCD is a personality disorder, and most people who deal with anxiety express a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors. Sometimes we use them healthfully. The way we set up our coffee or our tea in the morning or a protein shake or whatever we do in the morning. If it's something we do every day, it feels good. It creates a reward within us, right? Those behaviors help us. Sometimes they don't, right? And so a lot of times we'll see more obsessive compulsive behaviors in young people because it's almost like a little volcano. They're holding it in and it's coming out in weird ways, right? But they don't know how else to let it out. So paying attention to yourself, important. Paying attention to your children, even more important. And paying attention to the things they're doing differently. Did they not used to have a 45-minute bedtime routine? Did they not used to ask me to come in and out of the room repetitively, right? These are things that say fear. I'm afraid of something. I need extra support, right? When you think about the people you care about in your life, right? And you're in distress, we don't always do it well. We don't always say, hey, I need you right now. Sometimes we say it in different ways, but What we're really saying is, I need more support right now. I need you to be further in my life, right? Your children, your family members, your children, though more inadvertently and less passive aggressively, are saying that. And so we want to pay attention to what's happening with them. Okay, so here's some notes I wrote. Okay, we're in control of our experience, right? And I want everyone to think about that, right? We are in control of managing our personalities. We're in control of recognizing what's happening for us. If we're having a bad day, this is where checking in with ourselves is very important. I think like checking in the morning when we wake up. How many of you get up in the morning and literally like propel yourselves out of bed? A couple of you. Okay, nice, nice. You know, I think of like waking up in the morning as a coming into ourselves. It's like, this is, I'm like coming back into my body. I've been asleep, and now before all of the noise begins, I'm going to do this slowly, right? And that's a great time to recognize, how do I feel intuitively? Is it going to be a good day? What's on my plate? Are there things there that might cause me stress? And if so, is that going to maybe affect the way I'm feeling? And then taking that knowledge everywhere else with us, right? How am I communicating today? Am I communicating effectively, or is my anxiety communicating for me, right? So we have that check-in in the morning. And then I think at night, right, or in the afternoon, or at the end of your workday, or whenever you can find that space, doing that same thing. How was today? What went well? What were my successes that I can reflect on and use those as I parse through what didn't work for me? And what didn't work, what can I do differently? Rather than maybe taking on, and again, humans, I think we take on a very negative tone with ourselves, rather than chastising ourselves and blaming ourselves for what we didn't do, or what we wish we would have done, or what we could have done, saying to ourselves with compassion, if that happens again, how can I do it differently? What did I learn from this experience? What can I use moving forward, right? And I'm a big believer in ownership, right? I think that if we communicate with the people in our lives, and if we remove the stigma away from honestly things like anxiety and depression, and we're able to have open conversations with the people in our lives and say, you know what? I had a really tough day today. I had a lot going on, and I don't even know where to start. It gives us the opportunity to go to what's really happening, rather than getting defensive, shutting down, isolating, right? Communication changes everything. So that's my next segue. Okay, so communication, and I don't know why I thought I had, no, that's I'm like, I thought we were doing breathing in the anxiety section. Sorry. So I apologize. I actually have to look at that again. Communication. So actually what I was just saying, communication. So this is what I wrote down. No one can read our minds. Literally, if I told you how many times a day people in this profession hear someone say, I just wish they would know that that's what I want them to do. No one knows what you want them to do. That is a thing that that's like, this is my expectation, and I'm setting myself up for failure right now, because no one can read. People can read your expressions. Maybe some people can see that, but no one can see what's going on. And we assume all of these things, like someone knows what's happening for us. Someone knows what we're saying. And so start from empty, start from a learner's mind, right? No one can read my mind. And so I have got to communicate as clearly and concisely and compassionately as possible, right? Because we also want to be compassionate. We don't want to just, we want to think about how we would want to hear that message, right? And so for me, I always want to think about compassion. How am I delivering this, right? Okay, so next to that, I wrote saying what we mean, right? And what we feel, even if it feels uncomfortable. Again, with that, people knowing what we're thinking, right? We do this thing also with what we're saying, right? We say something and then the person does something different. And we're like, wait, but I told you to do this, or I said this. No, we assumed, we have schemas, we have ideas in our head of how things are supposed to be. And so if we say to someone, like a household chore, any random household chore, I don't even want to I don't want to assign a responsibility to a household chore. So I will say vice versa. And because I see mostly women here, right? So I'm going to say, okay, if we say to someone, I'm like, what's the least? It's nice now. People share, but they don't share that much. Research shows us they don't share that much. Taking the trash out, which I don't think anyone should be in charge of, right? But if we say to someone, whoever we live with, whether it is our child, whether it is our partner, whether it is our parent, can you take the trash out? All they heard was, can you take the trash out? That is the only thing that you said. You did not say, can you take the trash out right this second? Well, we're sitting here. And then when that action doesn't happen, you got to take responsibility for that reaction that happens, because you didn't say, I need you to take the trash out right this very second, because if you don't, I'm going to get very upset about it. You said, I need you, can you take the trash out? And so communicating what we need. I have been having a lot of panic. I have been having a lot of anxiety, rather than saying, I don't know what's happening. I can't deal, which that very well might be the case. I don't know what's happening, right? But saying, this is what's happening for me. This is what's going on in my life. These are the things that I need support with, right? Okay, so saying exactly what we mean. And then, and I reiterated this message, how do we want to hear what we're saying? This is where compassion really, really comes in. When we're hurting, when we're suffering, I think we're more defensive. I believe we're more defensive. Our guard goes up, a wall goes up for most people. And whether it's constructive criticism, whether it's, excuse me, growth-oriented feedback, or whether it is a verbal, bucket of water in our faces, right? It typically doesn't feel good when we're not in a good space, right? And so we really, really, really want to think, if I were in that spot, what do I want to hear? People who are dealing with a lot of depression right now are having a lot of, I've noticed we're going through cycles, right? As all of this is taking place. In the very beginning, people were very excited to do different things that they had not done before. And then the novelty of that wore off, and people realized we're stuck in this situation for longer than expected. And people started to wear on each other's nerves because everyone was dealing with their own stuff, right? And then we started to move to a healthier place. And I think we started to gain more compassion as we recognized everyone is hurting on so many levels. Someone mentioned, today there was obviously a very historic decision, and I think a fantastic, hopefully this is a move in a right direction, and we're not going to just put the cover back on a box, right? But there's a lot of changes happening around us, right? I'm watching Angela. I didn't know if the way you looked at me, I'm super cognizant. I'm thinking of the court decision today that took place, right? Okay, so everybody's been going through all kinds of things, and everybody's been experiencing a lot of things, right? We have been concerned about changes in our society, right? As a whole, right? We've been concerned about issues that affect the people we care about individually and as a whole. We've been concerned about our own families, our work families, our friend families, right? Everyone's experiencing something. If if we can say it the right way, if we can communicate it right effectively, they're going to hear us. It's going to get easier. It's moving past that initial fear. And so going all the way back to the anxiety piece, before we communicate, we're usually afraid of what we're about to say, asking ourselves that same question. What's happening for me? What am I afraid of right now? What am I afraid in what I'm saying that's causing this uncomfortable feeling, right? And so again, communicating best with yourself, starting with yourself. Okay, so moving on. So journaling. Does anyone journal already? No, wow. Okay, yes. Nikki's like, I'm here, I journal. Thank you, Nikki, nice. So journaling is a really powerful tool. And I think it's probably one of the easiest tools, one of the cheapest tools, and one of the most effective tools. You are not writing a novel. You are not writing a book. No one is reading this. No one is judging it, including yourself. There is no reason to be judging your journaling. It is a tool. It is an opportunity for you to say, this thing happened today, and this happened. And you know what? This was awesome. And this, and I'm angry, and I'm upset, and I want to see this. It is an opportunity to get that all out, right? It's also an opportunity for you to reflect on what's happening in some way. Wow, I notice that every time I sit down to write, I talk about my job, or I talk about this thing, right? Children, how many have children in school? Okay, so a few of you, right? Okay, so one of the things I hear parents talk about is power school, right? Power school is essentially the devil as far as I'm concerned. Okay, it creates its own anxiety for parents and for your children, because the teachers are very, very busy, or our educators are very busy, and they don't have time to always be adding grades live. Now, this is like everything, right? There's good this, and there's good mechanics and not so good mechanics. There's good, popcorn makers and not so good popcorn makers. Teachers are working really hard. And so grades, I think, are one of the last things for them to get into their to-do list. I think that it seems like they're really focused on their interactions. They're trying to be effective. And our kids are terrified of power school because their parents have immediate access to their grades. And while parents love that access, they're also typically pretty terrified of power school, because the minute they open it, it's like, what didn't you finish? What didn't happen? Why weren't you here, right? And then that starts this negative cycle of communication with your children. So one of the best things, so here's tuning into ourselves. Does power schools cause me anxiety? If the answer is yes, how can I change? And this goes across the board, on your phone, on your social media, on whatever you're using. How can I change my notifications so that I'm not torturing myself? Because people torture themselves with this, right? If used properly, social media is great. It also creates a lot of anxiety for people. Do we want constant dinging? Do you want to go on power schools? Do you want to look at your phone and there'll be 17 notifications? Limit what's coming in. It's helpful. So journaling, back to journaling, a tool, right? So prompt versus free association. Amazon sells great journals, or whoever you use for online purchasing. Everyone has good, inexpensive journals. You can spend $50 on a leather-bound journal if that's what you want, or you can get your child's loose leaf paper and staple it together. Either way, it works. I am a big fan of writing it down, getting a pen or a pencil and writing it down. There is something very connected in the way our brain processes handwriting. It is very different to the way we type something in. We're connected in a different way. Journaling every day, very effective. So prompt versus free association. You can buy a journal that has prompts, right? Today was good because when I see purple flowers, I feel, where you can write whatever you want. Either way, it's going to work. Get your children journaling, right? I know not everyone is big on writing, but it's really effective. So journaling, okay, and then mindfulness. And I'm trying to be cognizant of the time. Angela, what time do you have this?
Probably about 15 more minutes.
Okay, all right. I didn't want to go too fast, but then I'm like, there's so much information. Okay, so mindfulness, right? People, this is like a buzzword now, right? You go to Target or whatever, and you can see on the magazine rack, there's a mindfulness magazine. And it's like, people are really getting onto this. Mindfulness is a nice tagline of saying, what's happening, noticing what's happening for me, what's happening in my environment. So if we're practicing mindfulness, we're practicing it across the board, right? We're practicing it when we're waking up and we're checking in with ourselves. What is happening for me? What am I experiencing? How am I feeling? What am I taking into my day? We're practicing that same level of thought when something negative comes up. Anything, it doesn't matter what it is, right? I got a flat tire, right? I was driving and I got a flat tire. Okay, that's, you know what, here's a better example. You're driving on the interstate and you have to suddenly put your brakes on and you have that, I think I just had a heart attack moment. I think most people are familiar with that, right? The great thing about that moment is it is seconds in time. It's what we do after that moment. If you watch animals engage, and if you watch two dogs, right, engage in like a play fight, afterwards you see them shake, right? They're literally re-regulating their nervous system in that time. They're shaking, literally shaking it off. And so it's wild to think about, right? Well, we get to do that as well. We get to do that by paying attention to what's happening to us. When we nearly maybe crash into the car in front of us, or the car behind us almost crashes into us, that was 1 second in the day. It happened, it's done. We leave it there. Unless something came of it and then we're focusing on what's happening then, there's no reason to stay in that mindset. We've already noticed it. We let it go. Mindfulness is essentially noticing in the moment and letting it go, because once it happens, it is done. The moment passes. It's what you do in every single moment. I'm feeling anxious. I'm starting to panic. I notice when I panic, I start to get tingling in my hands, or I start to feel like I can't get that deep breath. I start to feel trembling or shivering, right? And so I'm tuning into what's happening in my body, and I'm breathing into whatever's happening, right? And so, again, we're paying attention always. I'm trying to wrap a few things into this. So breathing, right? When we pay attention to our breathing, again, another really powerful tool, we have mindful meditation. People think about meditation as a tool to just get silent, and it's not. It's a tool to pay attention to what's happening. Again, noticing what's happening in each moment. People turn away from it because they can't get silent. That's not the goal. The goal is what is happening for me, what is going on. So when we think about things like anxiety and panic and breathing, when we are starting to panic and we're starting to feel those heightened stressors take over, and we no longer feel like we have control in our body, it's going to be easier to re-regulate and shake it off, essentially, if we're paying attention to our bodies all of the time. Because what starts to happen is, as we start to get anxious and as we start to panic, we start to say, hey, I notice that my hands are shaking. And so now I'm going to practice breathing. I'm going to notice And so quickly, really quickly. So people breathe like, it's like, take a breath. No, this is not how we breathe effectively. An effective breath, no one likes the expression calm down, but I would love it if everyone would think about that as like a mantra that they're saying to themselves. Calm down, right? Every time you take a breath, calm down. And each time you do that, noticing where you're at. How am I feeling? Oh, I'm still feeling really anxious. I still can't breathe. Okay, so even slower. Calm down. And you, I love it. Cats are excellent when they show up. No, that's cool. Noticing how you start to literally bring yourself down. It's not going to bring you out of a panic attack. Like that method is not going to work for everyone. There's a lot of different things we need to do when we're panicking. We need to enlist someone, ask someone to tell you a story, ask someone to rub your hand, ask someone to rub your shoulder, whatever works for you. But we want to try and enlist someone to tell us a story, not about feeling better or trying to be okay, because that usually doesn't work. We need distraction in that moment. We need someone to tell us something that makes us stop thinking about how we can't do whatever's happening, right? But so breathing, kind of wrapping that up mindfully, right? So a couple things. Turning to our senses, right? So like I said, really throughout all of this, what am I feeling? Checking in with yourself as often as possible when you start to feel distress, starting out with a schedule, rituals like we talked about. How can I incorporate these activities on a regular basis and not allow myself to shy away from them? How can I make doing these things every day, journaling, paying attention, noticing, breathing, finding 1 or 2 minutes a day to just sit and breathe and say, wow, you know, it took me a couple seconds to settle down. Something's happening for me today, right? So checking in on ourselves all of the time. Journaling, breathing, exercise. I didn't talk about that, but very key. Exercise and food. Really quick, I feel like we need to make sure, and it's hard in the winter here, but even if it's like sitting in front of the window, we need to be getting some sunlight every single day. It needs to be happening. It's really beneficial for us. We need that. Exercise. I know not everyone is a fan. It doesn't need to be running. Get outside and walk. Walking is cheap. Walking can be done anywhere. You can walk around your house if it's raining and you really need to like just burn some stress off. It makes a difference. We know that when we when we exercise and when we get outside, we start to feel better. Food, limited sugar. Everyone will say this, right? Like sugar is bad for us. We are a nation of sugar addicts. We get angry when we don't have our sugar. There's a reason for that. It's not a great thing, but I don't believe in deprivation. And so balance in what we're consuming, but trying to eat as well as we can in the sense of, I feel like, and I am not like, I'm not sitting here. I don't think anyone should eat any specific way. I do feel like plant-based is really, it's beneficial for us. The more color we can get in our diets, it kind of balances everything out, right? Carbohydrates are balanced out by fiber. Same thing with leafy greens and a steak. If you can get some greens in there and you can get some colors, you're doing yourself a favor. You will notice a difference than if you're constantly eating a meat and a starch. Starch is another sugar and it just weighs us down. And if we're already struggling with our mood, it's going to make us feel worse. And if we're struggling with anxiety, it is going to jack us up and make us more anxious. So thoughts there. Okay, mindfulness, like again, like I said, eating, journaling, taking care of family and friends, self-awareness, and breathing, like I quickly mentioned. And, you know, if everyone wants to, that would be great if everyone like wouldn't mind taking a second and really taking a couple deep breaths for this last second before you ask anything you've been holding on to. It's so weird not having people talk back and forth. This is what it must be like to not be a parent. But if everyone would just, like I said, calm, I'm calm, just taking a couple deep breaths. And so breathing in and maybe holding it just for a second at the top and then letting it out slowly. And then doing it again. And maybe noticing that time you let it out even more slowly. And then just taking another breath. And just letting go of anything in that breath. Nice, nice, nice. It just makes a difference, right? When someone's angry and we take a second, when we're angry, and we take a second to step back and be like, what's happening, right? It totally changes our experience. So thank you for listening to me. I apologize. I tell stories like Stephen King. It's the same way I do everything. There's a lot of details and it's very much like, let's go all the way over here, but I promise it always gets back to the vampire. So thank you.